I'd like to introduce you to Vineta Bajaj. She's currently the Group Finance Director at Ocado Group, and she's worked there since early 2013, so you've got quite a tenure there. And if you know anything about the journey Ocado has been on, they've been on a huge financial journey since then. So there's been a lot of challenges. In fact, for the last 5 years, Vineta has been responsible for establishing the tax function and setting up the global tax strategy, the policy, the process, and leading the treasury function. And that includes raising over 2 billion, taking care of the technical policy, the financial reporting, including the execution of multiple year ends, going through M&A, finance systems, and basically the transforming the finance function. One of those challenges, especially because we can talk about all of that, but of course we are here to talk about the people. And actually Vineta just said herself, that challenge of changing from being a bean counter to a team leader and a team manager, knowing how to raise other people up around you and place those teams together. So now Vineta is leading the creation of a new centralised finance team to implement and improve the global processes. There's a lot going on there. Needless to say, extremely qualified. Vineta started her career in the Kerry Group, where she worked in a central group function, managed the finance teams across multiple locations, and at the very beginning, qualified as a chartered accountant with KPMG. So Vineta, you've not done much in the last few years. You've been very quiet.
Yeah, no, it's been quiet. Absolutely. Yeah. My social life is a bit lacking, might I add. But all good, all good. Thank you for that introduction, and I'm excited to be here.
Oh no, well, thank you for joining, because you have been through some huge transformations, not just in the technical processes, but in building teams. And also Ocado have gone through a major acquisition process and change. So what were the key challenges in terms of leadership? Have you found the key challenges that you've experienced?
Oh my God, that is a good. If I step back, I joined as a senior accountant. So I was one person doing the financial reporting, and now I lead a team of 150 people. So up until when I started in Ocado, I had never managed somebody before. And so over the last nearly 9 years, I've had to learn to manage people, as well as being promoted out from multiple people. So when I started my journey, it's just myself. Then I had a team of maybe 3 or 4. My team ultimately over 3 to 4 years grew to about 20. And then it grew to about 50. And then in the last 2.5, 3 years, it grew to 150. So that has been quite a journey, because you're learning as you're going. And for me, I think for me as a leader, I've always just thought about how I would like to see a leader. So if I think back, I always think back to when I was a senior accountant, and I look back to my boss or my boss's boss. I look at how they led. I think about their mannerisms. I think about why I was motivated to work for them. And it's kind of like parenting, although I'm not an actual parent, I'm a cat parent. You look at your own parents, my mom's going to kill me. You look at your own parents and you say, well, what do they do good and what would you not do? And it's kind of like that. So you look at the people and you go, actually, because everybody's got some good parts, and other people you go, I would have approached this slightly differently. So for me, I've just learned from the people that I've worked for, but also I always reflect and go, what would I want if I was an accountant, a senior accountant, a manager, a finance manager, a head of finance? What am I looking for and how am I motivated? And then what can I do or bring to allow them to have that environment that's the right environment for them and to be the right leader for them?
And how do you know all that? Because, I mean, as you say, there's 150 people there. That's a lot of different values, characteristics, personalities, motivations. There's a lot there to try and think, oh gosh, what would they want? And how can you be all of that to all of those people?
Yeah, so it's fantastic. So there's a few things I'll probably talk about. I think the first thing is we created a centralized team because as a large organization, we've been thinking about, well, instead of people doing monthly accounting as well as reporting, let's just centralize it. And lots of large organizations centralize things and then ultimately look at when they're going internationally, how that centralized process works, being maybe a 24-hour service, things like that. So when we created this function, actually, interestingly, a lot of my peers at the time came to come work, which was very odd. My support network that I would have had a WhatsApp group where we would have, I don't know, complained about somebody. They decided I had 5 vacancies, and 3 of them decided to move across to completely new and different roles, which I was not. I don't think any of us were expecting it, right? So that's one thing that helps shape culture, because people who've been in the business for a while help shape culture. But for me, with 150 people, the way I approached it was, I got my leadership team in place, which I had 3 people, 3 trusted people that I knew very well, of which I had to change my style because now I couldn't complain about stuff. They worked for me, so I had to change my relationship with them slightly. But what we did was, within about 2 months, we got the entire department together, and at the time it was probably about 85 because we were still hiring people. We had this afternoon where and it was during COVID, so it was a lot of virtual. Most of it was virtual. Some people were in the office. We put people in breakout rooms and we said, what kind of culture do you want in this team? And they came up with themselves. They put some stuff on a Jamboard and Post-its, and they came up with collaborative, trusted, teamwork, honesty, integrity, things like that. These things were really important to them, and we created those to be the values of the organization and of the team. And we lived and died by that. So we created awards off those. We recommend, and those words that people come back with, it tells you what's important to them. And there's some words that came back again. So you got 80, 90 people who are adding into this. And that's what we've just lived and we've driven the culture on. So I think that's one thing, shaping, letting people go, this is the kind of place I want to work in, and letting them have a voice. The second thing, it gives you an insight, because I can't touch every single person. Yep. The second thing is, if my leadership team know me and I know them and I understand what makes them happy, then they're happy, and then it goes on to their teams as well. So understanding your direct reports, especially your core team itself, is key, because they're representatives for you, your values, your leadership, and your culture. So making sure that they're motivated, they feel empowered, and they go on and kind of spread that word is also really key too. I think those are 2 quite key things. I think the third thing, which happens less now, which I'm quite sad to say, is, pre-COVID, in the office, I would talk to loads of people on the floor all the time. I knew everyone. I knew who had a kid. I knew when someone's 10-year wedding anniversary was. I knew who came in at 7:30 or 8:15, because I was always in early, minor points. And, I've lost that now, and it's harder now. And I'm sure there's a lot of leaders who are struggling with that challenge. I always open at the floor saying, look, everyone wants to book a coffee with me. Like, I drink coffee. I also need to eat too, because I actually am human. Please book a coffee with me, because I'd love to hear about you. And some people don't, most people don't. And with our town halls, I might pick on someone and I kind of go, you smiled when I said that, so you're having a coffee with me. I'm going to put a meeting in with you. And it just kind of helps break it down a bit, because you want to be approachable. But when you've got a team of this size, people will go, oh my God, she must be so busy. What is she doing? Oh, she doesn't have time to listen to me. It feels daunting. Just breaking down those barriers. Because for me, I would have approached my boss's boss. So why aren't they? And it's hard, right? Because there's a bit of society in there too. So I think it's those 3 things that help me try and lead that way.
I'm going to pick up on that last one there, because this is, I know for a fact that I've worked with leaders who really struggle sometimes with that last one, not because they don't want to spend time getting to know their team, but purely the pressure of time constraints. So you've clearly prioritized this as well, because you say, oh, she must be a busy woman. I mean, we've heard what you've done. You are a busy woman. So what do you think it is that's enabled you? Is it a case of prioritizing it? Have you got a higher value on having that time with your team, knowing all of the, building those relationships? Or is that just something that's natural to you?
I think it's something that's natural to me personally. I love getting to know different people from different backgrounds. I love hearing their story. It helps me because it means I understand what motivates them. Straight away, I can tell with some people, they want to be in an environment where it's a fun environment. Some people would say, I work 9 to 5, but I like to have, a deadline driven environment. Some people have a very, very busy household, and therefore coming to work is a form of escapism. But it gives you an idea of the types of characters. There is no time, but you've got to make time. You can make time to do your board report. You can make time to meet your people, because you have to, your people are, you always hire people who are better than you, always, because only then you can be better. You learn from them, you learn from your boss, and you learn from your people. So talking to my people and getting their perspective is just so valuable to me. It makes me a better leader every single day. And I think the other thing that's quite key for me is one of the reasons I've stayed in Ocado for so long, but as well as, and it's come down to my two values. I have two very core values that I talk about to my team. One is, without a voice, I have nothing. And I always say that I need to have a voice. I need to be able to express my opinion. I need to be able to be heard. You can tell me it's a silly answer, or thank you very much and we'll consider it, or we're not going to do that now, or actually, no, it's wrong because of X, Y, Z. Regardless, I'm heard. It's not, sorry, you're too junior, or sorry, you're, whatever it might be. And the second thing is, and this is really core, and I met somebody yesterday who mentioned this to me as well, I have to be myself at work, right? You bring your whole self to work all the time. I personally cannot work in an environment where I have to fake being something else for 40 hours a week, because that will have a toll on my own mental health. I can't fake to be something I'm not. And they can't do that either. So, I'm kind of like, if you want to come in, dress like whatever, if you go, I don't mind. If you want to say, I'm going to work, for my cafe for a week, I don't mind. This one lady I had, this is pre-COVID, she had a rescue cat and she settled the rescue cat in. And we didn't actually do a lot of working from home at the time. And she didn't say, she was like, do you mind if I just pop home for lunch to check on the cat? And I could tell it was like a concern. And I went, just work from home for a week, because you know what? I know you'll get it done and you'll feel better knowing that you're home with your rescue cat, And she was just so thankful, because one, I could see straight away it was really important to her. But two, I didn't want her to fake having to be here when she was thinking about this lovely cat that she just, rescued, who just wants to see who their new owner was. And it's being able to say, just be yourself, say your voice, say your piece, dress how you want, work how you want in any environment. As long as you're happy, then I'm happy, because then if you're happy, you'll be productive. If I'm happy, I'll be productive. And those are the two really key things on my values. So it's so important I make time so people hear that, because then they'll know that you can be yourself and you can have a voice. Because there's some ladies I've talked to who said, I've always felt a bit, can I say this? And I was like, well, why can't you? If you're going to have an argument with your partner, right? You can easily say something at work. What's the difference? If you're going to have a debate at the pub, why can't you say something? It's the same thing. So you treat everything the same. And then the restraint or the concern about should I, could I falls away. And then you're just yourself. And then you're your best version of yourself. I
call that the shoulda, coulda, wouldas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get stuck in the shoulda, coulda, wouldas all the time. And that's so, it's especially if someone's so conscientious and so worried, then it's great to have that concern, and great to have that element of, because you're worrying about the quality of what you're putting out into the world, and you're worried about doing your best and doing a great job. That's usually what's going on with people's heads. But it's also hugely limiting and holds back. And in fact, just the fact that you have found that you can be yourself. I mean, as a female leader, I'll ask you, in terms of how have you developed that space and autonomy to just be yourself? Have you ever had issues or challenges feeling that you couldn't do it, or even maybe the opposite? Like, how have you found your place there and your space to be able to just be yourself?
Two funny stories, but I'll tell you, I'll answer the question directly, which is, I don't think about it. I've never seen, I identify as female. However, I don't actually say, well, I'm a female and how do I make space for myself? If I'm good at what I do, what does it matter? People say to me now, oh my God, you've risen through the ranks and you've broken through a glass ceiling and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, how did you do it? I'm like, well, I worked hard. I got stuff done. Good things happen to good people who do good work. That's kind of my approach. Well, I think we haven't had people who have been promoted as much as I have at a senior level. So I think that's the first thing. We are getting better at our diversity. But yeah, so I was the first female finance director at a group ever. And I've risen through the ranks. People kind of go, oh my God, you started there and you went there. How did you do it? And I don't think about gender in this scenario. I think about the fact that I did a good thing. Now, people might identify with that and say that's part of their brand. My brand is I work really hard. I'm good at what I do. I try and learn every day, and good things come to me. That's very much my approach. But it's interesting you ask about how that impacts, because there was one very entertaining conversation that I tell a lot of people about my old boss, and he was going to promote me about a month later, but I didn't know about it. And we didn't have a dress code. We don't have a dress code. There's obviously an unwritten dress code. And if I go to the banks, or I'm obviously in a suit. But normally I'm jeans, t-shirt, hoodie. And I had a catch up with him, and it was a Friday, 4:00, and I was going back home to visit my mum that evening. And so it was Friday, long week, had my bag of my clothes, right? Basically had these jeans, had drains, had really dirty runners, had a fantastic t-shirt that was an image of Daffy Duck my best friend got me. Daffy Duck's like fantastic. And a hoodie. And I went in Friday afternoon and I sat down and I said hi, and he said, look, it's a really awkward conversation. And this guy's great, like he's one of my mentors, he's fantastic. And he said to me, if you ever want to be this is when I was still like a senior accountant. He said, if you ever want to be a CFO, you probably need to think about how you dress, right? And I was like, interesting. Now, some women might have been absolutely offended. I found this quite amusing actually. And I was like, he's like, if you want to be like a CFO here in 10 years, was what he said. Like, you want to think about how you dress. And I went, okay. After a few minutes, I said, right, what am I wearing? Like, now I am not really a fashion person, right? So I'm kind of like, I'm trying to work out what in his mind. I was like, is it jeans and a shirt, which is obviously the unwritten jeans, shirt, blazer? No jeans. Right now, he doesn't like jeans. He's like, no jeans. Okay, slacks. I was like, I think my granny wears slacks. I was like, I don't know what slacks are. And he went, every female has their own style. You need to work out the style that works for you. And I was like, okay, and this is going to help me. And he went, I'm sorry I brought it up. It was actually the most entertaining conversation I've ever had, right? Because I found it entertaining because he was like so awkward about the whole thing. And but I think what he was trying to do was, and this is a challenge, is that he wanted to promote me, because I knew about a month later he promoted me or offered me this role. But I think he needed to, in his mind, like, he couldn't promote someone who's walking around in a fantastic Daffy Duck t-shirt, right? And I think there's a point where he was trying to, people tend to promote people who look like them, right? And that was a bigger issue, right? Which is why it was slacks, not jeans, because he hates jeans. He never wore jeans. He always wore suit trousers and shirts, And I think that's probably a really interesting example that I went through where, someone kind of went, right, well, you are a female and you need to look at your style. And I went, this is absolutely zero bearing on actually how good I am at my job. But, if you need me to, I guess I'll figure it out. I went home. I'm fashion. I can't do fashion. My mother is even worse. And I was like, I don't know what to wear. So I went out the next day and bought black jeans. I bought a few black t-shirts, and I bought different colored blazers because I love color. And I bought some black bands because I was like, I can't wear heels. And I was like, right, it looks like I've dressed. And I walked in the Monday morning and I walked up to his desk and I said, hey, how do I look? 8:30 in the morning. How do I look? And he was like, yeah, fine. I was like, no. I was like, you told me to change my clothes. I was like, what do I look? He was just like, he said, yeah, fine, go. And it was just, well, you told me to change. Does this work?
Did it?
Well, it did, because I got promoted. But it was interesting, right? Because when you talk about examples of actually being a female leader and how you actually challenges you face, that's all. And he said it he's a very good-hearted man. So he meant it in a really nice way. It wasn't in a demeaning way. It was just more of just think about it. The way he said it was fantastic. And unfortunately, what I was wearing that day was also entertaining, because it was Friday. I was heading home and I was just kind of wearing my home clothes or whatever. So yeah, and it was odd because, he said women have a different style. But women can have any style they want, as can men. It's just what I'm wearing should be okay. It's also Friday at 4:00, by the way, So yeah, very odd actually. But I guess it just came down to, just as you said, men wear jeans, shirt, and blazer. Do women wear jeans, shirt, and blazer? Some of them do, some don't. I don't know what he was trying to work out.
I think you have to work at a fintech to do that, to wear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
The fintech trainers, the fintech jeans. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it really speaks to how much in leadership there is an existing culture and existing ideas that sometimes when you're, and it sounds like, very much you've just powered through, you've just been you and broken through, probably not even realizing maybe there were ceilings, and maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a reverse leadership situation where we're trying to actually say, hey, why do I need this? Does this actually, and actually by questioning and in a really positive relationship, like it sounds like you had here, which is just going, well, actually, absolutely happy to help myself get through into better situations. And you went there and you went shopping and you got those things, but you were very aware, sounds like very aware, it's like, does this actually have any bearing on my ability to function and do the job? And hopefully there's something that gets taken away there from the upper.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things I have a concern about, so I have two fantastic females who work for me, and they're working mothers, and I made sure the roles would work because they do part-time work. They do 4 days, I think they do 4 days each. And one of them is fantastic, and well, both of them are fantastic, but they both have different confidence issues. And I've often just thought and said, well, if you be yourself, it comes down to being yourself. If you're able to do this in your personal life, why can't you do it at work? Why are you second guessing yourself? You are like a strong, independent woman, and you can do anything you want. You are a working mother, you're married, you've got a fantastic family, you're successful in your personal life, you're successful in your professional life. Why are you second guessing yourself? And it kind of, people are always complimenting me about what I've done in my career. And I always just say, you kind of fake it till you make it. And it sounds so silly, but it's kind of true. If you believe it, if you believe something so hard and you just kind of get on with it, it'll just happen. So when they kind of go, well, should I, or I'm not really sure if I should approach it in a certain way, I'm like, well, what have you got to lose? Literally, the worst thing they'll say is no. And at least, as you said, shoulda, coulda, woulda. You might as well just do it. Because the one thing I hate in the evenings is when everyone goes through this, you go home, you get into bed, and your brain obviously replays all the things you should have done, or you could have done, or you didn't do well in that day. Not all the fantastic things you did, all the stuff it's always the negative, right? And a bit of the positive. And, I was kind of like, every situation I have, I go, I don't want this to feature in my nighttime reel. This is what I don't, I want to have the tiniest reel, and I'm more just kind of staring at the ceiling rather than thinking about, I wish I said this differently. And we do reflect on our words or meetings, things like that, but make sure they're few and far between. That's very much my approach. I say that to them all the time. I'm like, well, you've got nothing to, it really does come down to, what have you got to lose? If they say no, so what? Literally, so what? Doesn't matter. So
it sounds like you're so aware of your thoughts, and you're almost, from what you've said there, by lying in bed and not having the shoulda couldas rolling around, that you're almost selecting those thoughts. And I often have, so not the best heroine or character potentially to look up to, but my mum was always a massive Gone with the Wind fan, and so Scarlett O'Hara was very prevalent in when I was raised. And for those of you listening, you'll all know that, of course, I was raised by a very much a powerful single mum who works in London and works in the city and things like that. So she just had to get things done. And one of the recurring phrases that Scarlett O'Hara says is like, I can't think about that now, I'll just think about it tomorrow, so she can power on with whatever she's doing, because it's not useful for her. And so to some extent I've taken that with me as well, which is just like, that's not useful to me right now, that's not serving me, that thought process, so goodbye. Now, what we're really talking about is emotional intelligence, which is to be self-aware and to regulate one's emotions or thoughts. So is that something that you bring into your leadership style?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about Gone with the Wind, because as you described the phrase, something I've said to this lady who worked for me a couple of years ago, who just worried about everything, just worried about all this work all the time. And I said this phrase that I say all the time, and she went, I love it. She said, I get it. And she went, that helps me. And I just said to her, would you see to emotionally park this just for a second? And I went, and I just emotionally park it. And basically every time she would get flustered about something or frustrated, I said, let's just take the emotion out for a second. Still valid. Just look at the problem. We can still be annoyed about who said what to who, but let's just look at the problem cold to then try and solve it. And then we can get frustrated afterwards. And I'm always like, let's just emotionally park it all the time. So that when you talk about emotional intelligence, that's a huge thing I try and bring in. And I do it very, very consciously. I think in my very early career, I had this fantastic boss who could not deal with anybody who showed emotion. Fantastic in every way. Oh my goodness. I mean, I looked up to him and everything. I still do. But he was just could not deal with somebody who was going through an emotional roller coaster at all, you know? And I kind of decided very young, and I think I've just realized this, is that I always thought, you know, people tell me, well, you know, women can be seen as a bitch, or you can be seen as highly emotional or whatever. And I always told myself, I'm not going to play into any stereotype. I'm going to be myself. And if they're expecting that I'm going to cry, I'm not. And if they're expecting for me to have an emotional outburst, I'm not. Because if they don't know what to expect, they don't know how to deal with it. Because they're automatically expecting I'm going to get upset, or I'm going to throw my toys out of the pram, or I'm going to get high pitched or whatever. And every scenario I've been in where I know someone's expecting me to react in a certain way, I automatically give them the complete opposite. Whether I regulate it completely internally and then I go outside and have a cry, absolutely fine. But to the individual, I never show it, because I've always found that, you know, it was just a few odd statements that I've had where it hasn't really bothered me. But when I reflect and I look at women who work for me, I can understand that it might impact people, where they might kind of go, well, she's very highly emotional, or, you know, well, she only cares, you know, she's probably going to, I don't know, be more focused on home or something like that. And I'm like, it's completely irrelevant, by the way, like completely irrelevant. And so when I think about those things, I think about the fact that actually I'm going to make sure you can't put me in any box at all. And I do that a lot with my emotions, like a significant amount. And it was interesting because I had this manager that I had, fantastic. We had this error in the board pack, so we had this board pack. And my God, I mean, it was my first year in Ocado, I think. And just we had this huge Excel file. And just no matter how much I had my person check it over and over, and how much I checked every formula over and over, and it was a huge Excel file, something was always wrong. So we went like one month, okay, wrong, and we had to go in last minute and go, we're changing a page. It was really a tiny error, nothing significant. Second month, it's changing the page. And then my boss was like, you know, like, this is like, you know, like, you've got to get it right. And I was checking, like my person was doing it, and then I was like checking every formula. It was just this convoluted Excel file. Some rogue cell somewhere was just not picking it up. And the third time, and we did everything, and it was wrong, and it went out, and I was so upset, right? Like, I was really upset, because I was like, I've tried so much. I was just so emotional, right? And so I said, look, I need to talk to you. And then I said, I'll meet you down there, right? And I just cried my eyes out in the room, my own. And I was so upset. And we were sitting in this room where it was dark in the evening, and I could see the mirror at the window outside. And there's a glass behind where the door was. And I was bawling my eyes out because I was so upset that I'd done it again, right? It's like 9 months in, and all I wanted him to do was go, look, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. And what happened was, as he came, he would look in, see I was upset, and then walk away and wait for me to sort myself out. And he never came in, right? And I mean, and I was sitting there kind of going, and I remember I watched it, right? And I watched it, and I was just so upset, because I was just like, I've tried everything. She tried everything. I tried everything. The Excel file, we need a system, you know? And 3 times he came and checked, and he never came in. And I went, right, get your shit together. Don't do this again. You know, that's what a good manager, well, that's what a manager shouldn't do. That's absolutely what a manager shouldn't do. And so for me, that was quite a learning moment for me, because, you know, I cared so much. I was so upset, and a good manager would have gone, I can see you've really tried.
Yeah.
It's okay. Let's work on it together. Something. But the fact that he kind of went, I'm still leave it to it. And then when he came in, I was composed. And he said, right, what happened? Okay, right, let's try and fix it, whatever. But he at no point acknowledged the fact that I was upset. And that's why with me, you know, I make sure that I understand why people are upset, or, you know, that it's okay to be upset. Of course it is. We're human. It's really important that, you know, if you are upset, we just don't ignore the fact that there's emotions happening in the room. So for me, that moment was really key to just go, no, I'm not going to show this, because you're expecting me to be an emotional person now, and I'm going to make sure I'm the complete opposite, because you can't deal with a situation like this, which is very odd, actually, very odd.
Well, can I ask just briefly, what was the impact of not acknowledging it on you?
I mean, I changed how I looked at him as a manager, for sure. You know, there was two instances with this manager who, again, fantastic, you know, really great. Another incident was, we had this guy, really good guy, but he just had something out for me, and I don't know what it was. You know, there's always somebody that you just don't get along with, and I got along with him. And he, you know, we had a bit of a run-in where he was raising his voice. I kept myself completely calm. It was on the open floor. My boss, same guy, was like two rows down. And then he kept saying, he was just very aggressive, like, no. And I was like, look, I showed it to you on the screen. I kept my cool completely, showed it to you on the screen, whatever. And then when I was on the screen, he was just muttering away in the background, right? And I just in my breath said, just give me a second. And he was like, how dare you speak to me like that? Do you know who I am? And I mean, and he really talked down to me. Oh my God, he was so aggressive, right? And that was fine, right? And the thing is, the whole floor heard. The same boss didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. And actually, this other lady said to him, look, do you want to intervene? Afterwards, anyway, it settled down. I was actually quite upset about it, but I didn't show it how upset I was. I just kind of got myself together. And I went home this weekend. I was really upset over the weekend because it was just so aggressive. Yeah. And which I wasn't expecting, right? And then on the Monday, I said to my boss, I went, why didn't you intervene? And he said, look, I have a good relationship with that guy, but actually it's been on shaky ground. So if I got involved, it would have impacted my relationship. You seem like you were handling it. And it's like, I clearly was not handling it when somebody else in the team turned around and said something like that to you. So those two moments were quite key for me, because it made me realize that, what would I want my manager to do in that situation? Yep. And how do I make sure I do that? But also, they all expected me to react in a certain way. They all expected me to be highly emotional, be erratic, be whatever they expect a female to be perfectly honest, or a young female to be. And I just wouldn't give it to them. And since then I've gone, no, I'll keep my emotions in check. And it's been a very, very conscious decision where I'm in a moment and I'll go, I can react to this, but actually I'm not going to, because you're not worth seeing my emotions. I'll deal with them myself later.
That sounds like such a defining moment, and I'm sure one that resonates with everyone. Yes, particularly women, but I imagine there's men that have experienced this probably more privately, in a sense, experience that situation where, you know, there is a defining moment where a manager just almost lets you down so badly that you go, I'm never going to be like you. And as going back to what you said before about that parental moment, sometimes that's the classic tale of the moment when we realize our parents are human. But this is more than that, because of course a leader is put in the position. They've been promoted, almost elected to be in charge of other people. And that, I think, is something we forget is very much a privilege, as well as just you're doing well in your career. But actually what we're going to do is we're going to hand you all these people to look after, and you better take care of them. And I mean, I still remember years ago, I was in one of those horrible situations where I was working with, let's say, a finance company, and suddenly I got an email come through, and it was requesting that I go to the boardroom, and I noticed a few other people across the floor also stood up and had obviously had the same message. And suddenly we were all in there, and my manager was in there as well. We were announced, because we were new, first one in, first one out, that we were to be made redundant effective immediately. we had to go immediately back to our desk, not touch our computer, pack up our stuff, and anything else would be sent to us. And it was humiliating. And there were about 25 that was happening to. And my manager was in there and he looked distraught. He looked more distraught than I did. And I went back and I was just kind of still a bit in shock. And I went outside with my coat and my bag. And I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. And he said, I am so sorry. You're one of the best on the team, but it's just the way that it was. They had to make cuts, and this is just the way they decided it. And he was in tears. He was so emotional, and it meant so much to me that he cared, and he said, and that he'd fought my corner, because that's what I felt like someone should be, is like your advocate, is your champion, really, like recognizing your skills, recognizing when you're not doing as well as you could be, and helping to bring you back up again. And also, in that particular case, the respect I had for him. And, and I kept in touch with him for a long while after, because I just thought, yes, this is someone I'd always have, I'd always go back and have such a high regard for what he did and how he responded in that moment.
And that's a great example. It's just so telling that in that moment, although he was so upset, he took to reassure you.
Yeah.
And that's really, you talk about these people that we take under our wing in our departments, and actually it's about understanding. It's about understanding that you have to treat them and make sure your entire organization treats them, as in like your leaders and all your direct reports, right? Treat them like you want to be treated. And that is about building a culture of trust and making sure your message goes out. I had this really interesting conversation with somebody yesterday. Was it yesterday or last week? And it was actually two people. So it was a catch up with two random people. I have open doors in my calendar and people book time in. So last week I had one or two people book time in. And I had two fantastic ladies who, two finance managers who work for me. And they asked me, they said, it's interesting actually, they asked me this, because I don't think a man would be asked this, how did you build your brand? So they asked me, did you go, they were like, people go and want to work for you, and you drive this culture, and I operate through fun. So I always go, look, there's lots of deadlines, but we can have fun along the way. That's it. We're going to get the work done. We can get the work done through sheer fear, or we can do it and have fun, because it'll get done and we know it'll get done. So why not just enjoy it, right? A positive 40-hour week has a positive impact on your mental health and makes you have a positive life. And that's my job, basically, is my approach. And they asked me what my brand was and how I built my brand and how did I go out to build my brand. And I kind of was like, and it was so funny because it was a really reflective moment. And I'm sure you find this as well in your time when you speak to people. It was one of those questions where I just kind of went, I didn't do anything. I just was myself. And I'm sure there's questions I've asked some senior leaders, like my own mentor. And I'm sure he's like, I'm just kind of myself. You just are. And people build and create that brand. And I found it quite interesting, because I think what I reflected on more was that if I was a senior male, would they ask me this question? That's really what I found interesting, because there were these two young women, and they're in their late 20s, early 30s, and they clearly were trying to think about their competitive edge, because they see it as being, well, I'm a female, and how do I rise to the ranks and things like that, and I need to build a brand in their toolkit. But actually, men don't think that at all. I don't think I've ever had a man who's talked to me saying, how do I build my brand? Have you?
Yes. No, and I'm trying to think of all the personal brand coaches or something like that. Not say anything. I mean, obviously, sometimes I get approached about that, but it's it is. Well, I know, having said that, sometimes there's a crossover with like presenting or influence, or like, but they're talking about being a speaker, or
That's
and that kind of same thing, but not in an overall sense. No. So that is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm aware that we're having having such a great chat, but time is against us, as my RE teacher used to say. And there's a new feature that I've actually been building up for a while, but I'm just going to announce it right now, which is that with previous guests and also from me as well. What I've built on my website is something called the Leaders Library. And because actually a lot of books are mainly because a lot of people who listen to this, they're lifelong learners and things like that. And actually we often get ask, what are you reading right now? What actually is not just the Amazon bestsellers list, but actually something has impacted you. So what I have done is I've actually created a little library of book recommendations from leaders that they have actually said, yes, this book has hugely impacted me or had such a difference in the way I think or feel or do or behave and for the positive. So this is one where I have asked Vineta what her recommendation was. And your recommendation, Vineta, was The Outsider by is it Albert Camus or Camus?
Camus, French.
No. And so very briefly, just give us an overview. You've given me a lovely insight into what this has done for you, which will be uploaded to the Leaders Library. And what I'll also do is I tend to find resources like video content and things like that to support it, so that it's an all-around resource for someone to learn the key concepts about, as well as, of course, buying the book. So what did this do for you? Why did you choose this book?
So firstly, it was a great question. So it really made me think about books that I've read. In my personal time, I spent a lot of time exploring philosophy, and that helps me determine for me my personal values as an individual, and then ultimately that translates to me being a leader. The Outsider, firstly read it. It's only like 120 pages, and it's either called The Outsider or The Stranger, depending on which translation you take. And it's written by a philosopher who was quite important on the philosophical theory of absurdism. So basically, right, the whole concept is, and this is a bit morbid, so bear with me, life is pointless and there's no meaning, right? So that's kind of the concept of...
Sounds uplifting.
Yeah. Right, yeah, this is great, right? So therefore, everything that happens or doesn't happen, we get to choose whether we care about it. Because ultimately, at the end of life, it's meaningless. That's kind of the concept, right? Now, take that with a pinch of salt and go, right, well, what that means is, and the book is fantastic, it's just a normal story about an individual who, it's about the fact that he didn't cry at his mother's funeral, and he was ostracized by society because he didn't show an emotion that people were expecting. That's basically the premise. And there's a fantastic story around it. But really what it comes down to, and what it's done for me, is go, if I have a situation, I can choose whether I want to be angry at it or I want to let it frustrate me. Now, there's a point where you just compartmentalize too much. I'm not cold. I have gone through the emotions in my own mind. But if I'm in a situation at work, I can look at it and go, right, well, this is a very frustrating situation, or I'm very annoyed, or I'm very upset. I can choose to be annoyed or upset about it, or I can emotionally park that for a minute and I can deal with the situation. And so what it's helped me do is just work out, well, in the grand scheme of things, it actually doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, if I have a bad day at work, ultimately it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't. And that helps really put things into perspective all the time, because something will happen at work and you'll go home and it'll be on your mind. It'll ruin your day. It'll ruin your weekend. Kind of like when I had that big argument with that guy a while ago, right? And that ruined my weekend. But I let it ruin my weekends. I let that happen to me. I know the situation where I got an email from my boss at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. I read the email. I couldn't sleep that night. I was so angry about the email. I was angry the next day, but I let myself be. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, I didn't care and he didn't care, and no one cares about it. And this book really helped me do that, because in my personal life, in my work life, I just reflect on everything and go, is this important? Really? It probably isn't. Just kind of get on with it. Now, there are things that bother me, and I can choose to go, I'm very upset about this and I want you to see my emotions. Or I can choose to go, I'm very frustrated about this and I want you to see my emotions. It's very rare you'll see that. You'll see me be very passionate about things, but you won't see the negative, and that means that from a brand perspective, if you're just thinking about that, I am just a very positive person who very much regulates what negative things I allow to impact me. And this really helps me. That's
incredible. I love that. Yeah. So that, and it goes back to that. You're in control. You are in control. And actually, for anyone who doesn't know the quotient, the EQ quotient, the emotional quotient, that is one of the key markers, which is basically realizing that our emotions are, I call them warning signals. An emotion is a warning signal to let you know that something is going on, a bit like on your car when your fuel light goes or something needs addressing, but it's either going to be useful for you moving forward or it's not going to be. So that's where we're only just realizing, I think, the capacity we have to choose and to regulate our emotions and how they help us feel. And I will leave on that note, of course, it's important to deal with it, but otherwise it's just being repressive and that ends up in passive aggression. But it is really important. So that's a fantastic book. I'm afraid we've got to go, but thank you so much for coming on. This chat was absolutely incredible. Thank you for coming, Vineta.
Thank you for having me.